Okay, well, hi, Meirav. Welcome, and thank you for joining me here at Entrée Capital's Founder Spotlight series, where we highlight some of the inspiring founders in our portfolio and invite them to share some of the lessons that they've learned along the way. Are you ready to get started?
Sure do. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So first, if you can, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are as an individual, and then jump in straight after that a little bit about Versatile and the company that you've built, and then we'll get into the meat of this conversation.
Sure thing. So I usually introduce myself through saying you could take your pick between the family's black sheep or just a serial parent disappointer. Both fit the narrative quite well. My dad was a general contractor, and my brother is a project manager. However, I ended up at Intel. So that did not necessarily please my dad very much, only to find myself back in construction at the end of the day, right? So I always say that I hope that now both parents are happy, because my mom wasn't entirely happy with the whole leaving Intel to bootstrap a startup, right? So I can't seem to get it right. But kidding aside, and kind of probably leading into why I founded Versatile with my co-founders is my brother, aka not the black sheep, actually had experienced a fatality on his job site a couple of years ago. And not only did that change the dynamics of our, I guess, quote unquote, regular Friday night construction debates, but it kind of like struck me as crazy, right? That this is still happening. And one thing kind of like led to another in the conversation. It became quite evident that though construction is probably the most fragmented and non-structured, I'll say, manufacturing process on earth, it can and should still be controlled. And the key to controlling it goes through empowering the people who build, the actual people that execute, with data that they never had before, with that ability to measure and see things that they couldn't see before. And with that, we're like, how can we do that? Making sure that we stay out of their way and just be helpful. I call it non-intrusively. I actually prefer saying we naturally fit their workflows and we ask them to change nothing. You don't need to record or report. You don't need to think for the system. It's just there. And it helps when you actually need the help, or it shed lights on events that you need to understand. Kind of like why we zoned in on the Crane as our data provider. It's such a beautiful storyteller. It does touch most, as like 80% of the processes that we're looking to measure and shed light on. And it also allows us to be naturally fitting kind of like the environment that we support. So kind of like one thing led to another. Something got drafted on literally a post-it that night. And here we are, what, 4, maybe 5 years later. So wow. It's been a good journey.
Could you explain real quick, just for those listening that aren't familiar with Versatile, what exactly are you're an eye in the sky, you're part of the construction process? You know, you had mentioned data. So are you cloud ops? You know, where would you sit, would you say?
I'll say, if you think of the key for any industry's improvements, it starts with measurements, right? Like you can only improve what you can measure. Or think of, I don't know, plan versus actual. You could think of Versatile as the actual in construction, and funny enough, that did not exist before. So construction is probably one of the only industries where you don't actually know how long things really take, and you don't have accurate measurements. So you're estimating, or my favorite would be guesstimating or averaging based on whatever input you can get when you're looking to plan. And it's not only the way you plan your projects, it's literally how you plan and execute your day-to-day. So by extracting data, again, non-intrusively out of the job site, there's actually a device behind me that's our hardware enabler. At the end of the day, we're, software as a service, but we're hardware enabled. So that device gets the data out. It uses the crane to do that. So we're at the tip or the hook of the crane, actually replacing that hook with what is kind of like a ruggedized smartphone, if you'd like. And that story, or those multi-sensor data that comes out of that device, is how we decipher the code of operations of the job site. And it translates into daily, what we like to call digests, because they're highly digestible. So the way we communicate with our customers goes through those quick emails. It's like information nuggets that we believe will impact their day. So 5 a.m. before craziness starts, the superintendent can look at that specific digest and say, how am I managing overtime? What's my actual time on hook in terms of how am I managing the subs? And again, it's really a barometer for the entire site. So it's not necessarily that we use the crane. It's not meant to optimize the crane. It's meant to optimize the job site, right? What conversations do I want to have with my trades or with my partners within the company if I'm self-performing to actually inform better decision-making than what we had yesterday? What can I actually learn that I never had access to before? So that's kind of like the daily aspects. Obviously, the data accumulates. It validates a lot of their gut instincts. The people we serve are super smart and they do build quite well with or without technology. So it's, to me, mainly inspiring to see how they use those information nuggets that we give them, and how incredibly efficient they are in shaving off time and running overtime in efficiency that's never been seen before. Organizing their sites before or after the day starts, just having the information available to what works well for them and what doesn't, right? My favorite is probably outliers, but we won't get into that.
I have a question that I didn't speak to in advance about this, but you had mentioned that your SaaS is hardware enabled. I want to kind of hone in a little bit on that and what that means to have built that. Did you have, which one came first? How did you build them both so that your SaaS and the hardware that was attached to it were on equal footing when it came to readiness? What did you prioritize? How did you prioritize? I think that's an interesting topic because there's not so many companies other than the ones that are in these outlier spaces that have that. And I want to kind of jump in on that and, your thoughts.
Well, it kind of all have to happen at once because the hardware is the enabler. It's the key to the data. So you don't have software services if you don't have the right data to support those services with, right? So all of our measurements come from that enabler. So everything got pretty much built together. And if we go back to that night, this was our key to how do you extract data out of the chaotic, though wonderful and incredibly impressive job site without interrupting their day, without interrupting their workflows, without asking them to change for you. And I think that's key when founders approach, especially industries and especially with a category defining product, you have to understand how you provide value without asking them for anything. Because if you can't prove the value, what are you asking them to do and why would they do it? So this was kind of like, what about the crane and can we use it? Going under the hook had numerous good reasons, including the fact that it does allow us that non-intrusiveness. The multi-sensor approach means we're not a camera. We're actually learning 10 times faster than anything else. And it allows us to be agnostic to everything that will potentially be a disruptive factor to how we grow or how we implement our solution. So going under the hook means we're literally agnostic to the make type or kind of like, I guess, ownership of the crane. We're literally just rigging, just happens to be smarter and extracts the data in a very naturally flowing way. So it had to be built at the same time, then validate that the data that you're actually getting allows you to do what you're set out to do. At the end of the day, you've built a software. You just need the data to flow. So we kind of like build the hardware in a garage. There are stories behind the first hardware that I will not tell right now. But as soon as we realized that the data that's actually flowing allows us to do exactly what we said we were going to do, the code started writing itself in a way. So you had to get that done. We worked with a single kind of like design partner just to get that done in terms of proof of concept, in terms of we have hardware that is safe to use and is indeed rigging and naturally fitting. The data that flows allows the software and the algorithms to operate the way that we expected it to. And then the sky's the limit, because even right now, we're probably scratching, I don't know, the surface of 2% of what's possible for our industry using the ability to learn this fast. So it's fun.
You had mentioned that you're category defining, and then also now that you've only scratched 2% of that surface here. Can you tell me a little bit about like being in a space that's not, or it doesn't seem, at least from the outside, super overcrowded and is a very, very specific niche category? Has it changed the way that you've fundraised, that you've hired, that you've built your company, that you've thought about your company? What does that mean to be category defining in the business metrics sense of things?
Well, it means you need to, and I think that's true for any business, but probably double true for my type of business. You need to be obsessed with the problem that you're solving. When I said that we represent the actuals in a world that did not have this, then if you think of plan versus actual, how do you get that done, right? And what does it do to your users, to your industry? And I think every kind of like thought I ever had went through that rather than through what is the nuts and bolts of the solution itself. There are many, many ways to solve the problem. Just be obsessed with the problem, then understand your users well enough, and the rest will kind of follow. And I think that has guided me in how I hire and how I fundraise and pretty much how I do everything. But it's the worthiness of the industry as well that I like to point to when I think of our fundraising journey, for example. So I don't know 3 years ago, we were not a funded company. Actually, February 2019 is when we kind of like raised our first $1.2 million in pre-seed, and then seed in like literally 3 years ago. And I think I heard many investors say that the industry is slow or antiquated, and there, to your point, probably better investments in other fields. And I was like, you just don't understand.
You've never been to a job site, apparently.
No, it's more than that. Once again, if you're in love with the problems, like you don't understand the problem I'm solving, and you don't understand the industry and the worthiness of the industry. And I think everything goes around that. Fast forward 3 years, we've raised over $109 million. So clearly people see what I see now, and I speak to the worthiness of the industry, and I speak to what making a difference in the industry that builds our world, where we live, where we work, where we drive. Like literally, there's no element in our lives that isn't impacted by the built world. You cannot ignore this industry, and it is absolutely worthy of the best technologies. It does have to be non-intrusive or naturally fitting, and it has to work. It has to do something real. Once again, solve a real problem for real people. Then it's easy to fundraise. It's easy to hire talent. It's pretty much easy. Well, nothing's easy. Then again, the journey becomes easier across all fronts. So I think it's my slight obsession with the problem and the fact that I am truly in love with our industry and with making it shine, because they're already great. They don't need me to make them great. What they need from Versatile is to simplify things and to empower and to make them shine. And I think we do that very well. Hopefully that helps.
Did you have to spend any time educating, because they always say if you have to spend all your time on educating your users about why they need you, it's probably a problem, but you spent a lot of time educating your investors or other people around you why they needed you. Was that an issue when it came to your actual day-to-day users? Did construction teams need an education, or the contracting teams need education on why you were important? And if so, how did you go about doing that, breaking? And the reason I'm asking this is not specifically you, but for other founders to apply it to their space, if they
Yes.
are in this category defining space, how much time should they be spending educating about the need? And I'm sorry, I'm going off totally now of our script, what we discussed. I just think this is interesting.
No, I love the way the discussion is evolving, right? And yeah. the short answer is yes. The long answer is be smart about it. Like, it's not about how long you need to spend or what methods you use to educate your market or your investors. It's to me, it's the same thing. Again, it's about what is the problem and can you establish that the other party believes what you believe. It's funny, I was just giving that as kind of like a talk to my sales team when I said, guys, the only thing that really matters is establish that there's a shared belief, right? Like, when you start a discussion by saying, this is what we believe in empowering the people who build, we believe that the measurements will make a difference, then the conversation becomes easier, both in the field and at the corporate level when decisions are made at the higher level, right? And understanding your users and understanding the buying personas sometimes better than they understand themselves, I think is key for every founder. Like if you're building a company, especially if it's product that is category defining, but honestly, if you want to be the dominant product, even if it's a more crowded kind of like market. And by the way, construction tech has become way more crowded now than what it was 3 or 4 years ago when I was getting all the no's, right? So people get it now far better, and I hope I trailblazed for others just a little bit in my domain. But that ability to understand your users, your investors, like what drives decision making, and again establish that shared belief, I think goes a long way and is often missed in all conversations.
You know, you had mentioned that the idea was born out of a death on a construction site. So assuming it started from this need or this recognition that there needs to be more safety, but I assume it's not the only reason that construction companies are using you, and it's grown beyond that. So can you talk a little bit about that process, any features or things you had changed or things you had learned along the way in order to hone into exactly what versatile is today? And I mean, it might be different next year or, or tomorrow, but for at least today, how you found that product market fit?
Sure. Well, we've actually never pivoted, not even through, a pandemic, and our lighthouse year literally ended. We went kind of like, we announced that we're commercially available on March 12, 2020. Boy, was that a really good or really bad date to announce that. Yet we've grown. Again, it's because of the value we provide, not because of the timing of our marketing announcement that wasn't ideal. So we used that year to validate a lot of our assumptions and learn pretty much everything that we needed to learn about our users, or revisit what we thought we knew about our users. And again, my experience and I guess just the natural tendency to understand and kind of like connect with a problem with a user rather than with the solution really helps. Safety is inherent, yet not the main thing about our product. So I believe that safety is, and generally, and I say that so many times to our customers, for example, I'm not in the business of harnessing people. And going back to that accident, for example, he fell off the scaffolding and he actually did have a harness and there was an anchor. So clearly it's not about that, and technology can never stop that. It's sequences of events. What if he was never there? What if he had the extra 30 seconds to clip? And I believe we're in the business of changing sequences of events, and that has always been our approach. So it's not about a feature. Again, keep it very simple and naturally fitting, not just in the way the hardware fits the job site, but in the way we communicate with our customers. 2D, email, text, just the way the site actually operates. Don't force anything that's so unnatural to the day-to-day and influence those sequences of events. I believe that inherently, when efficiency goes up the right way, then safety goes up with it. We're loved by safety directors and kind of like executives across the nation for that reason, and with I think maybe only 2 features that really speak directly to safety, like a no flight zone and the ability to text them if they have a crane that stands with a load, which is a high risk for an extended or whatever time frame that we set in the system, right? But other than that, it's really about those sequences of events. It's really about the way we build and what we understand about our process, and how do you control a chaotic, fragmented, and non-structured process in a way that allows you, as in the superintendent that's actually in charge, to do so. How do you cut through the noise to give that person what he or she needs at the time that they need it? I think most technologies miss that in other industries as well. So if I take the kind of like the parallels, again, be in love with your user, be in love with the problem, then everything becomes just a little bit easier. Not completely.
You said you didn't pivot, but I'm interested in understanding, like, did you start from that space of knowing that in order to succeed, you needed to solve other business problems of your customer, and you didn't want to stick with one problem? You knew already from the beginning, we need to not just focus on safety. If we actually want to sign contracts, we need to focus on other things.
Absolutely. This was never about, though safety triggered it. Again, I think safety is inherent to every improvement that our industry will see. So I never saw the need to be a safety tool. We were never a safety tool, honestly. Though I tell the story, I also tell the story of how to this day I cannot help that specific worker, right? Not directly, but through influencing sequences of events. I'm confident that he wouldn't have been there, right? So it's a different way of understanding, again, the problem and the solution and your industry and what it needs and your users and what they need. And don't get fixated on one thing, but again, if you hold the actuals on a plan versus actual, there is an unlimited kind of like way to influence almost every decision making. Honestly, it's about narrowing it down and focusing that sometimes gets hard, right? There's so many shiny objects that you could go after, and our customers have brilliant ideas sometimes that I have to say no to, or at least not now. But yes, I always knew it's just like, and I know you didn't ask, but for example, especially for companies that originate, let's say, outside of the US, that knowledge where our market is was always extremely clear. We never sold in any other market. We've been an American company from day one, and we sold into our target market from literally day one. No distractions, no confusion, no need to run pilots or POCs in irrelevant customer markets where the feedback will not help us. Technology wise, you could test your technology anywhere. When it comes to understanding your users, go straight on to where you have the biggest impact. And I think that's once again where founders sometimes get confused or choose based on their own geography. They don't want to travel, they don't want to move. Boy, did I live on airplanes and did I move my family across the ocean. But again, be absolutely convinced that you're doing something that's bigger than you and bigger than your team, and that the synergy for the world as you create something that never existed before is worth all the kind of like blood, sweat, and tears that you put into it. Wow. And it is, by the way, it is worth it completely every day.
It seems like you got it all right. Are there things that you look back, and I guess your early days, so 3 years ago, that you realize were kind of bumps in the road that you needed to figure out, or and related to that, and advice that you would give about those tough things that might have happened to you? I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Everything seems really golden.
Oh God, no. So I get at least half of it wrong on every given day. I always say that I'm making you have to make decisions, you have to move fast. So you're bound to make mistakes and only realize that you've made mistakes later on. I'm still learning kind of like leadership, because leadership changes over time, right? Like a team of 10 or 15 is not the same as a team of 100 people or even 50 people. So I'll say I'm still getting the jigs of some of that and what motivates people and how do you build high-performing teams across time and hyper growth, for example. So I think hyper growth is one of the things, and we've figured out the fact that this has been like 3 years from nothing to a lot, and still 2% done. Boy, have I made mistakes. But like, take the fact that we launched commercially during COVID, right? And I think one of the best things that I've done was recognize the fact that, boy, was that launch not working for us, right? And go back to the drawing board in terms of like, do we need to pivot? Like, what just changed? What happened? Coming back with the conclusion, and I just did the same exercise as recession has dawned upon us, and I've never run a company through a recession. So talk to me in about 3 years. Let's see how we dealt with that. But back to the previous crisis only 2 years ago, I ended up telling the team that I just don't know, right? That I don't have a crystal ball. But what I do know is that as the world around us goes crazy and there's so many things that we can't control, similar to our customers, by the way, we have to focus on the things that we can control, which is our customer satisfaction, how well we listen, how incredibly better the product can be for them as they come out of shelter in place, for example. And many of them did go into shelter in place, like literally the same night, right? And we decided not to charge them during that time. This was a tiny company slicing its own revenue, which wasn't a lot, by 50% overnight. per CEO decision, by the way, right? One that I actually regard as one of my best, because once again, proving that we're part of the industry and part of its solutions and never, ever, ever a part of its problems, right? They had enough. We all did. But that ability to just focus on the things that you do control and say like laser, kind of like pinpointed on those things without letting the rest of the world confuse you is major and super hard. And I probably got it wrong half the time, and I'm probably getting it wrong half the time right now. So looking at a recession, once again, like, do we need to change? Will our pricing still work? How does this impact our customers, and how do we help them all win? Will be my kind of like my next obsession, right? It wouldn't be about versatile and how do I make versatile successful, because I believe we will be successful if we continue to, do something incredible for the world and for the people that we serve. The rest of it just follows. Like if you create value, the rest of it just follows you almost naturally. It's if you stop creating value, or if you understand that you've missed the mark on what value is, that's when you need to start being concerned. So I'm constantly trying to see whether we're still there and what needs to change. And we do make changes, and I do recognize sometimes that we've made a mistake even a year ago. Like there's a few things about our product that I look back a year and I'm like, oh, I wish we did not make that decision. How do we correct? But look forward, and if you're not willing to make mistakes, don't even embark on this journey, because you're gonna make so many of them. So no, it's not, just to be clear, it's not all kind of like rosy and perfect, and I don't have it all made. Hopefully I have the right approach to crises as well as to success, right? Because it's really easy to celebrate success, and we've had, more than a few, and it's way harder to manage crisis and to keep, people believing what you believe when things become slightly vague, right? And again, 2 years ago that was the case. I think another case is upon us right now. So if founders are either at an early stage of the journey or even at growth stage, which is probably the worst for a recession, focus on what you can control, map that out, and get your entire team working just on that, because the rest of it will distract you and confuse you and put you in the wrong mood to start with. And sometimes it takes you a few months to snap out of it. So, and that's okay too, by the way.
Now we had no, I want to continue this conversation. It's funny, we in the beginning of this we said that we would try to keep it short. I think we've we haven't kept it short, but this is super interesting. So I want to kind of wrap it up with two kind of final questions. One is, why Entrée? So in the beginning you had said you had bootstrapped, and then you even paid on your own for certain things. Why did you decide to go with investors, and why was Entrée on board with you? Why Entrée?
Okay, so investors first. If you're going fast, you better get the right fuel. And when I realized there was definitely kind of like a fire, and that by putting fuel on the fire, we will go faster, that's where I approach investors with that conviction that is probably very much me. If you speak with some of the partners who've invested in us, I think they'll continue to say that crazy redhead just kind of like has conviction and grit like no one else, right? But it's that conviction that I was offering investors an opportunity that I believe made our fundraising successful as well. And hopefully everyone that joined the journey is happy that they did. It is a hell of a journey. I enjoy it. It was clear that we can go faster with funding. Plus, when you're building a hardware-enabled kind of like SaaS company, chances are you are a venture capital company, but really incredible returns for investors. So as soon as I realized that we will offer venture capital level returns, and that our trajectory for all the way to IPO is very clear to me, and I can articulate it, it was a no-brainer, kind of like speaking to investors. And that's kind of like when we did pre-seed and then seed. And Entrée actually joined at Series A, and I'll give Entrée and shout out to Iran specifically, though I love all the partners, but Iran just had that same conviction and grit, I guess, that I appreciate knowing very well. Very adamant to join the journey, kind of like making sure that I could see the value that Entrée brings to the table with the right introductions at the time, with an extremely founder-friendly approach and I appreciate that about probably all of our investors, but again, shout out to Entrée, the ability to say, we're your backseat. We're not trying to drive for you. I'm an extremely independent founder. Like I'm not looking for anyone to tell me what to do. I want advice to come from absolutely every source so I can make my own decisions, because the only one that's in the seat 24/7 is me. You would never know what the right decision is. You could give me great advice from your experience, but don't try to drive. So I appreciate that very much about Entrée. I'm like never trying to drive, but offering really good advice, really good connections. The support of saying, just give us a call if you need anything, but we'll stay out of your way and we'll not take any of your precious time away when you don't need us. So we're here to support. Nothing else is something I really appreciate and was a huge kind of like factor in my decision. And I always do, and this was no exception, I speak to other founders. With that, maybe as a parting notion, when you're in a really privileged position, and I wish that upon all founders, I happen to be in that position when we fundraise, and you do actually have the choice because you're offering an opportunity, right? Then choose your partners carefully. And it means you diligence your investors as well as they diligence you. So talk to other founders that have accepted their money and ask them about their experiences. And if you're smart about it, talk to founders who failed, because the ones who are successful will always tell you kind of like the great things about it. But and even if they were successful, but there was any kind of like challenges, then stick to the challenges when you're trying to understand the dynamics of conversations, but speak to at least one founder that actually literally failed, as in like they closed their company. How did that investor behave? Because that tells you so much about that person that you're partnering with, and what will they do through success and through challenges. And though that is not the scenario I would ever even contemplate, also through the harder times. Again, to me, it's just a way of understanding the person that I'm kind of like literally going to do business with for God knows how long. So it is important.
I think that is fantastic advice to kind of end this off with. Is there anything else you feel that you need to add or want to add, or should we wrap this up?
We should definitely wrap this up. I'll say one thing to founders though. Know how to ask for help, both from your investor, but also from other founders. Like the ability to say exactly what you need is crucial. I see way too many founders that say something like, can you introduce me to investors, which in a way requires me to think for them. And like, what is your business? Kind of like, what would be the right investor for you? What's in my network? That's not going to happen, not because I don't want to help, because no one would have that level of time and no one would know your business. But if you do your homework and you're being very specific, as in like, I research your contacts, here is what I'm asking and why I'm asking for it, boy, will people be happy to help you. So just know how to ask for help and you'll get so much more. I get 99, if not 100% of my requests for help actually met. And that's a really nice percentage to hold.
Wow, that is really very good advice. That's really, thank you, Meirav. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was fantastic. This was really good. We could go on for hours longer, but we'll
probably
we'll wrap it up and plan another one. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a pleasure.
Sure.
Thanks. Bye.